Today I'm joined for a chat by Cherylee Houston, who's been playing Izzy Armstrong on Corrie since 2010, and who we've recently seen appearing on Corrie despite currently filming at home, thanks to some help of some DIY filming. Cherylee, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm really happy to be here. Thank
I'm
you.
lovely to have you here. First off, how are you? I can't even begin to imagine what a tough time you must have been going through this past year and a half.
It's been surreal.
Mm.
I think it's that thing of going, actually, yeah, you don't realise what happens to the human mind until it's sort of retained in one space. But also that's time as well, because time just goes in a blur. And I
Yeah.
was reading somewhere early on in lockdown, it was about the fact that we don't have many new um, visual stimulus. So then experiences blur into each other. So yeah, I mean, I've been lucky. I've been very busy with DANC, the Disabled Artists Network community, and we've managed to do an awful lot there. So that has kept me quite busy, which has been nice.
Yeah. Whenabouts did the spread of COVID stop just being a bit of a concern you heard about on the telly to become something where you realised, hang on a minute, this is going to mean massive changes to my way of life?
I don't think any of us realised that till summer, till a
No.
few months into it, did we? And because you sort of hearing about it, and then when they started to say that, I hate the term vulnerable, um, people people with health conditions should be cautious. My friend Mo, who's also disabled, we'd sort of gone, oh, because they were saying you're gonna have to isolate for 2 weeks. We're like, Mo, you can't stay in for 2 weeks on your own. You're gonna have to come and live with us. And then she stayed 4 months, 5 months, which was great and lovely. But you kind of go, oh my god, now it's 16 months. Don't know.
Yeah.
It's yeah. I think we kind of good job we didn't know what we knew at the start now, because
Mm.
that had been if you'd have going lockdown last March and I was told then I'd be still in next August, that would be, yeah, I think that would make my head explode.
Yeah, I bet. Were you worried at all about telling the Corrie bosses that you were going to need to start shielding and stop appearing on the show for a while?
I they sort it was a two-way conversation, which
Mm.
I mean they're so supportive about everything with me and always have been, which is phenomenal. Um, yeah, and it was a conversation that carried on once the government shielding had stopped. We then had more conversations, um, you know, and yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate and looked after.
That's nice. But as far as you're aware, had there been any stories for Izzy coming up that had to be, massively tweaked or scrapped?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I hate to think of it now because of all the fun she could have had.
Oh, so what sort of things have you been able to do to keep yourself occupied whilst you've been shielding?
Well, I've been running the DANC, the Disabled Artists Network community, and before COVID, we had 450 members. It's basically, as a disabled actor, I was forever told we don't know where to find you, or made to feel like you were the only one. And I knew there was a much bigger community out there than is apparent to the industry. So we started, me and a couple of colleagues started Triple C, which launched DANC, the Disabled Artists Network community, and we were doing every 6 weeks. We were doing meetings, and all disabled artists were coming from all over the country, and it was really exciting. The one pre-lockdown was at ITV London. We had 113 disabled creatives in the room and 17 industry guests. But now, since last March, we've been doing 2 webinars, 2 workshops, masterclasses a week with really key industry professionals. And we've gone to over 1,150 disabled artists, and we're having some really massive conversations. We're partnering with Netflix, ITV, Sony. Yeah, just doing a lot really, and having those conversations, getting rid of the fear, because I think a lot of people are scared about disability because we're scared of getting it wrong and saying the wrong thing. And it's about having those conversations. Go, nobody knows the answers. It's ask. Let's have the chats. We can and also that I think is being Izzy on Corrie has really proved that it can be creatively very interesting. So,
Yeah.
those are the conversations we're having about, it's about representation, but it's not really representation because that's just a word that gets in the way. It's about actually reflecting life on screen, which isn't done as much as it should be.
Yeah, yeah. And your partner Toby must have been a massive support to you through all this as well.
Yes, he's he built a sound booth in the front room, and then it moved to the living room,
Yeah.
which actually looks all right. But he's moved. We had two bookshelves that then moved into made a box, and then we've been doing radio, and he's been doing a podcast and things behind there. So yeah, we've sort of kept each other entertained. Yeah, we have spent 18 months, 60, I don't know how many months it is together, but it's been a long time.
And now you're in a storyline with him.
Yes.
How did that all come about then? Was it something that you suggested, or the showrunners, or what?
It was one of the writers, Debbie Oates, who's a friend of mine. We've been having conversations, and she was sort of saying what was reflected, she could see in my life, was being reflected elsewhere by lots of other disabled people, and lots of people with anxiety, or for many reasons why people were shielding. And then she took that to Lindsay Williams, script editor. She's had a script, she's bigger than that. And Ian and Verity, and they ran with it, and they all had conversations between themselves before they came to me with that. But so they'd really went, this story needs to be told, and those, it's really important. Ian was saying really important to reflect Izzy and keep Izzy in the show. And that was phenomenal what they did for me, to be able to record at home. That was like reasonable adjustments on tenfold, which was brilliant, because that's what the world's sort of done, was the world's opened up to disabled people through access, through Zoom and all the things like that. But for a television show to record an actor at home, that was massive.
Tell me a bit about how that all works then, the filming at home.
Well, it was a bit of a long process, as in they auditioned Toby first to check he could act before Christmas, and then, which was lovely. And then there was lots of, they did seem to make it very seamless. But originally, they were looking at how they could do it, because they then did a test with Toby, part of his audition, but also to see whether they could check whether whether they could do the tech correctly enough to be able to match it on screen, so it didn't look like somebody filming themselves at home. And then they dropped off some camera equipment, and then me and Toby learnt a lot. Because also it was like that thing of going, well, we need to learn this before the day, because otherwise that could be an awful lot, added pressures for Toby first time on Corrie, for me first time doing that, this time working together. We needed it to be very slick, but they were fantastic. So we had, I think it was a good week or so before. Well, we'd had a lesson. We'd learnt quite a lot about lighting stuff with the audition, but then, because we had that equipment for a week to sort of play around and learn and become familiar and see what we could make look good. And then we had the camera equipment for a week, so they very kindly cleaned it all down, ensured that it was brought to me safely, and then it was time to be allowed to be isolated before we then used it. And then we had a lesson with a lot of crew teaching us how to use the radio mics, how to do the lighting, how to do the camera. And then it was talking quite a bit with Mickey Jones and Di Christian, who's the directors, about camera angles, sort of showing this is where we think the set should be, where do you think the camera should go. And then it was quite a surprise on the, we knew before the day, but we never did it with any of the other actors. We did it through Skype, and it was recorded, so we had a first AD reading the other lines into us.
Oh yeah.
Which was quite surreal. The one where I had to cry a lot was my friend Woody, which was I was like, I'm not looking at you, because so it was. But I mean, I remember because also Tobes then had to do an awful lot more than me, because I can't physically stand up, sit down, move things, my muscles tear and my bones dislocate. So there was times when I remember between a couple of takes he had to sit, move the chair, then sit back in, because that's the thing. Say on set, you go, no, let's move that a little bit more. Props guy, come in, move it a little bit more. So that was Toby, up, down, up, down. Then the lights moved. That was Toby up, moving those. Then the camera, then the sound, and then we had to move something on props background and check that those were in shot, and the sewing machine was in shot, and the knickers were facing the same way. And then each take, the camera's in sort of the corner of the room, and Toby had to stand up, start it recording. It was going down a live feed to Corrie. and he'd have to go camera rolling, then they'd do all the things, then he'd get in position, and then they'd say action. So
Right, that sounds really. Were there any technical hitches? Anything that just went kaput?
oh, I'd forgotten to turn my radio mic off when we tested it, but thankfully they'd wisely put spare batteries in. I'd forgotten that.
So, what was it like being Izzy again after all this time of just being Cherylee?
I'd missed her, and I missed everybody else as well. I mean, I am so lucky to work with some incredible, incredible people, very talented actors, and it was lovely. And it was like when I first started back, I was doing some on WhatsApp videoing. So then, like Jenny McAlpine or Tina would phone me from their phone, and we'd do the scene. But then they'd hold the phone up, and then everybody in the crew would wave, and it was just lovely. It's been, I'm very, very lucky.
Did you sympathise with the way that Izzy was trying to cover up the extent of her struggles to Carla and Sarah?
Annoyingly, because I think anybody with a chronic pain disability or disabilities will know that one where you just don't want to admit it's you. Well, it's not, because it's not you, it's your body and it's your physicality. And also because Izzy didn't have any care support, hasn't really been having people in to help. She got poorlier and poorlier. And I think admitting physical health is defeating you a little bit sometimes is quite a biggie. There's quite I think a lot of us patch on I'm all right, and then shut the front door, and then it falls apart afterwards, sort of thing.
And she's been really secretive about it to Gary as well, hasn't she?
Well, I think because you didn't want him to go, well, I'll take Jake then, and that's not a negative that he would be doing that, because he'd be trying to support and help, but she didn't want to stop being a mum.
Is there an element at all that for Izzy, the extent to which she feels in danger from the outside world doesn't quite align with the reality of the situation now that she's been double jabbed and everything?
She has been double vaccinated, but I think we're dealing with so many unknowns. And I think that's where quite a lot of disabled people have been in similar situations before. So therefore, sort of, it's not, I don't think it's the word caution, because actually I think it's appropriate actions for how you feel. And I think it's really difficult for people to judge other people's reactions to it, because if you feel safe, that's great. But if somebody else doesn't, it's about supporting them in that feeling, because it's such an unknown to us, isn't it?
So far, we've seen a little bit of Fergus, who, according to Izzy, is just a helpful neighbour, but it feels like he's always there with her. Is he a character who we should be maybe keeping an eye on over the next few weeks? Maybe whose motivations for helping Izzy perhaps turn into being something a bit more complex than Izzy has been making out?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because we kind of know a little bit more because of the backstory we had in Tobys' audition, and he was a very sweet man who sort of offered to rig up a signalling system, so she needed help, because she'd fallen over, and that's how he'd started to help her. So yeah, I don't know. It'll be exciting to see what does happen.
So last year marked your 10th anniversary on Coronation Street, and during that time we've seen Izzy courting Gary, dealing with him being overprotective, having a child through a surrogate, losing her sister Katie. What have been some of your highlights over your time on the show?
I've been so lucky to have so many different storylines and be able to explore how Izzy is in different circumstances. One of my favourite things is the factory, if I'm honest. And I loved working with Mike. I do love working with Mike. He's such a brilliant actor. I learned a lot through working with him, and I think we both pushed each other in a creative way. Aside from that, and I had such a lovely family. Yes, and the heartbreak of losing them, and but the joy of the factory is what I think Cherylee is missing, as well as Izzy, of that team and that group of people, and the fun we have, and how they work as a chorus. I love that work. It's very, we're sort of like, there's the chorus, and then there's always somebody whose story is the lead that's happening, but then the facilitation of that and the fun we have with that, and be able to find moments in those moments I really miss and thoroughly enjoy as well.
Well, thank you so much, Cherylee, for coming onto the podcast today. It's been lovely hearing from you, and just learning all about how this story and the situation has been from your point of view.
It's lovely to have come on. I feel very honoured. Thank you.
Bye-bye.